So those are the relationship stages. A couple of things to keep in mind, and this is a visual of what we just talked about, those 6 stages. So stage 1, contact, is that first green circle, green and blue circle, and then stage 2, 3, 4, deterioration. Now, repair is stage 5, which is to the left of deterioration, and disillusion is 6. Now, notice on here, there's a couple of things, is the exit arrows. The exit arrows basically say that at this point, I can get out of this relationship. So the contact stage, I turn around, I see somebody, perceptual, I think they're really attractive. You go over and talk to them and you think, oh, no way, this person is not for me, not going to happen. You exit the stage right there. You don't move to involvement. Likewise, let's say you see this person and you think, well, gosh, she is amazing looking, or he is just what I've been looking for. You talk to him and you think, you know what? I really like this guy. So then you move to the involvement stage. And there you start testing and intensifying. You get to know each other better, ask them lots of questions, see what they're all about. You may then find, you know what, I thought I liked them. They seemed okay at the beginning, but then they just became really weird or were way too different. And then you exit. So those are those exit arrows. Now, the arrows that is between involvement and contact means you can go back to the contact stage. Let's say you've started some testing and intensifying, but you maybe not intensified that much, and so you don't spend a lot of time with the person, but you see them at school or that sort of thing. And then maybe you kind of go back to the contact stage because you haven't seen them for a while, or you haven't really talked to them, or maybe it's been summer break, and you actually have to go back to the contact stage because you haven't had a chance to really be involved with them. So those are those arrows between the stage. Likewise, let's go from involvement to intimacy. I've tested, we've intensified the relationship, and I go into intimacy. We are dating. We've made that interpersonal commitment. I've met this person's friends and family. We've gone out together as a couple to family engagements. And I've realized that, wow, this is somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with. And then you make a different interpersonal commitment of an engagement. At that time, I would say that you probably go back to the involvement stage because now the testing that you're doing is totally different. You're testing this person to see, are they going to be a good long-term partner, which is much different than before when you were testing to see if they were just a good short-term romantic partner. That's a much different type of role, a long-term life partner versus somebody who you just want to date and spend some time with. So you could also move there. The intimacy stage, there's an arrow that goes from one side of the intimacy circle all the way back around to the other side of the intimacy circle. And that's a self-reflexive arrow. And what that means is interpersonal commitment, social bonding. So you've become engaged, right? Maybe you've moved back to the involvement and you're still testing what kind of husband they'll be. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you felt like, you know what? I don't have any questions. I don't need to test them as husband or wife material. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay in the intimacy stage, but it is going to become a little bit different because now our interpersonal commitment is an engagement, not just a dating relationship. So that's what those arrows indicate and tell us about movement among the different stages. The next thing about relationship stages, or the implications that we need to think about, is there are significant events in our relationships that we would call turning points. And turning points are very big events that have a tremendous impact on our relationship. Now, they can either be positive events, such as your grandfather dies and your romantic partner comes with you to the funeral. They have to spend a significant amount of time with your family, and it's a very difficult time for your family. Well, that's a very positive experience because you get to see this person as very supportive and they just fit into your family. That's a turning point. Another turning point could be maybe one of you's had a significant health issue. And as you've dealt with that health issue, your partner's just been extraordinary and so supportive, and that just draws you together, and that's the turning point in your relationship. They can also be negative. For example, infidelity, that can be a turning point that's very negative, but your relationship becomes totally different or it dissolves. And these turning points vary culturally. It just depends on the culture that you're dealing with. And then next we have the relationship license. And the relationship license is basically a permission to break a rule. Understand that it increases as your relationship becomes more and more intimate. So that means that as married couples continue their relationship, there is more of a lax in following the rules. There's probably also a lax in the number of rules you have to follow. The relationship license can be reciprocal, which means it's equal for both people, or non-reciprocal. It's unequal. There's some cultures, I know that some students have told me that they come from a Hispanic culture, and whatever culture, and Hispanic is a very large culture, so it could be Spain, it could be South America, it could be Mexico. So understand I'm talking about a very large number of people, and this may not apply to you if you're of Hispanic descent. But there are relationships in which husbands are allowed to be unfaithful to their wives, but the wives are not. That's an example of non-reciprocal. That's a husband's job is to provide for his family. He's not supposed to be faithful. That's just not how it works in their culture. I look at that and think, well, that is just crazy. Who would ever put up with that? But in their culture, that's just how it is, and they wouldn't be able to find somebody probably that wouldn't subscribe to that ideal. So that's definitely a cultural one. And then last, they're usually implied. We don't usually talk about them. And this creates, obviously, stress and conflict when we just assume that these relationship licenses are just what they are, instead of talking about them and saying, you know, I'm going to break this rule. Is that going to be okay? Or maybe that's not a rule that even works for us. I know that for a long time, my husband and I had a rule that neither one of us would ride in the car by ourselves with a opposite sex coworker. Now, if there were multiple people, it didn't matter. So I could ride in a car with two male coworkers. He could ride in the car with two female coworkers, but we would never be in the car with just me, one male coworker, and him, just one female coworker. And then it came to be that he worked in a setting that it was just nearly impossible. He had to take doctors out to lunch. He had to take just that one doctor out to lunch, and they were female. So we reevaluated it, and we said, you know what? I think that this rule needs to be broken because it doesn't apply. And so it's not a rule that we follow now, and it seemed to be just fine, but it was a good rule that we had for a while. But we talked about it, and we didn't just let nonverbal communication do what it does. We definitely wanted to discuss it. So make sure that you do that as well when you're talking about breaking rules, but also you understand rules in relationships can't always be followed. Now, rules to be faithful, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody's supposed to call before they're coming home. Sometimes those rules get broken, and we need to be flexible as long as it doesn't become a detrimental pattern.